let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to share my screen with you. I hope everyone's doing well today. I usually like to sort of just chat, socialize before these presentations with whoever's in the physical room with me, but that's not an option. So here we are. There we go. Okay, so you should be able to see my screen now. Funding your graduate education for State University, fall 2020, Office of National Fellowships. That's the office I work for. So we're going to start by just talking a little bit about my office. And then I'm planning on introducing you to different opportunities that might pique your interest. Just know that if none of the fellowships I speak of seem to pair well with you, that doesn't mean that there isn't something we work with that would be a good fit. And so it may be worthwhile, no matter what, if you like the structure of how we work with students, based on what I'm about to tell you, I think it'd still be worthwhile to set up an appointment with us. And so you're going to get an email from me within the next few days after this presentation with not only a link to the YouTube video, but also you'll have my email address. You'll be able to reach out to me if you would like to set up another appointment. Cool. So for graduate school in STEM research or research, because there, at least one of the fellowships I'm talking about today extensively also covers social sciences if it's a research specific degree. And so keep that in mind if anyone in here is a social scientist. These are the most common sources of funding. So by departmental funding, we mean from your degree program. So if you have a master's program or a PhD program you've applied to, they may have some funding. Maybe they'll give you a research assistantship where you work as a researcher on one of your professor's projects. There might be a teaching assistantship where you are teaching classes. I imagine that many of you have experience taking classes from graduate students here at FSU. And so that's what this would be like. And then other graduate assistantships, my office hires usually 1 to 2 grad assistants a year for 20 hours a week. And that's to help us sort of handle the entire undergraduate population plus its alumni. So those are the most common sources of funding within the university you've applied to. And then there's these foundations or institutes, and the two listed there are the two that we're going to talk about. These are usually privately funded organizations, maybe bequeathed by someone who's passed on, or if it's a mission of maybe like a private organization to fund graduate school for certain populations. And then you have organizations, and I think this sort of maybe parlays quite well between the two, the foundations, institutes, and this. So you have organizations like Society of Women Engineers that can pool resources from their entire population to provide support to up-and-coming students or up-and-coming future engineers, as an example. And then you have government fellowships. So this will be things like National Science Foundation, which funds a lot of research that goes on around the country, has fellowships called like the Graduate Research Fellowship Program, or you have the National Defense Science and Engineering Graduate Program. So this is sort of a good idea of where you can expect to look for funding or be successful when looking for funding. We're going to focus predominantly on the second and the fourth ones. I'm going to actually start, and I'm going to spend a lot of my time talking about the National Science Foundation's Fellowship, and then we'll sort of move on from there to talk about NSDEG, or NDSEG rather, and another example of that, and then we'll talk about Ford and Hertz as well. What I would say is, if you find funding in one of these other options and are looking for support in applying for it, then we could still be a good resource for you. So just in case you don't remember what campus looks like, here is one of the buildings off of Landis Green, and this is the Honor Scholars and Fellows House. You may remember Chick-fil-A being on the first floor, but this is where we're located. Both the Office of National Fellowships were on the third floor, and then on the fourth floor with that balcony is Office of Graduate Fellowships and Awards. So if you're an undergraduate student currently, or at the time of your application, you'd work with us. If you're an alumni at the time, when you apply but haven't enrolled at another institution, you can still work with us. If you're a graduate student, when you apply for any of these, and you'll find that some of them do allow you to apply as like a first year, for example, then you'd work with, and you're at FSU, you'd work with Office of Graduate Fellowships and Awards. So what does work with mean? Here's some bullet points, but I would say the bulk of our time is spent on this sort of pathway, like helping students find fellowships that fit their interests. I'm looking for, like, example would be, I'm looking for grad school funding and I am a STEM researcher. Then we would focus on fellowships that fit that. And we would introduce you to as many as we could. And then once we figured out which fellowships you would be most interested in applying for, then we would work with you on those applications. And we do so predominantly, most of our time is spent helping you to edit your essays. At least in my experience, none of these opportunities will allow you to apply with anything less than some essays. And the most common pairing is a personal statement of some sort and a research statement. So one essay going over like who you are and what you care about and what your motivations are, and another essay going over your research experience, or another essay going over a research proposal that you would like to make, or a research experience that you've completed. So a lot of our time is spent there, meeting weekly, meeting bi-weekly to give you feedback on your essays, answering questions about like who would be ideal recommenders for you, who could support your application in your department at FSU, as well as who are you trying to work with beyond FSU? I mean, it's a big question that if you are currently, say, a rising senior or an alum who is interested in going to graduate school in the next year, definitely a question that should be on your mind is like, who is out there, out in the world doing the research that I'm most excited about? Where do they teach? And can I go study under them? And so we can ask sort of like reflective questions to help you get to the point where you have some idea of what the answers to those questions might be. But a lot of our time is spent on just assisting you with the writing. I will say no one in my department comes from a heavy STEM background. We have some, musicians, we have humanities, we have education, we have counseling. So our ability to help you with the material that is specific to your field is fairly limited. And so what I usually tell students is like, hey, I hope you're also getting this reviewed by like a mentoring faculty member in your department. I'm happy to tell you, is this compelling? Does it make sense to a layperson? But I'm going to trust you on the science, and I'm going to tell you to go chat with your faculty to make sure that the science is sound as well. Yeah, and so I'll usually spend a month to 2 months helping students with an application, meeting on a weekly basis before they click submit on that application, which may sound wild because you probably usually turn in your first draft and get an A, but that doesn't work with these types of applications. You do need to edit and revise and revise and revise. So plenty of times students will do 6 to 10 drafts of an essay before they click submit on it. And we're there to support you through that entire process. Cool. Now let's talk about that within the context of some fellowships. So I said I'd spend probably the bulk of our presentation on the National Science Foundation Graduate Research Fellowship Program, or NSF GRFP for short. You can apply to this in your senior year. They're typically due at the end of October every year, and I believe the application has opened, and so this is something you can actually start working on today. You can also apply to it in your first year of graduate school. If you're doing and for people who are doing research-based master's or doctoral programs, you have to be a U.S. citizen or a permanent resident. You cannot hold a graduate degree at the time of application. They list their fields there. And this is the one that, as I said, does allow for students to apply to do a social sciences degree. We've actually had a couple history students get this because they were doing data collection in the history department and wanted to continue to include data and analytical research in their graduate degrees. So what does this application entail? Personal information, a personal statement, and previous research experience essay, and then a proposed plan of research essay, and then 3 letters of recommendation and transcripts. We're gonna zoom into the 2 essays, so we'll talk about those in a moment. But before we do that, let's talk about the recommendations. This is just some tips that I encourage you to take to heart. If you happen to be in here as a junior or even a sophomore, and you're thinking, well, I don't know where I would get 3 professors to write recommendations, I would say start building those relationships today. And if you're a senior and you're thinking the same thing, honestly, the semester has just begun. And I know open office hours seems kind of weird these days, but reach out to your professors that you are interested in, or professors you're taking right now, or previous professors, to just drop them a line, say, hey, would you mind chatting? I really enjoyed X class that you taught in spring of 2020, and would love to catch up with you and tell you some of my interests and what I did this summer, or love to hear what you were doing this summer. And then current professors, like, hey, I really enjoyed. I'm really excited about this course. Week 1, your introduction was great, and I would love to set time to chat a little bit more with you about what we're doing. So start if you're not in a place where you feel like you've got the relationships you need for recommendations, start developing those relationships. I would also say that professors are really good at introducing you to fantastic opportunities. We have a lot of students who are referred to our office because a professor told them to chat with us, and they may have otherwise never heard of us. And they're good at finding, particularly since we're talking about research, like they're really good at finding research opportunities too. I see some people are posting in the chat, which is fantastic, and I will probably circle back to that after I do the NSF portion of this presentation, just because of how much time I spend on that. And then we'll do the second half of the presentation, and I'll look at the questions again. So yeah, so these are just tips on that. I hope you're looking at it while I was chatting. If you weren't, again, there will be a video recording of this available that you can look at later. So this is the personal statement. It's 3 pages, as you might have, as you saw. Outline your educational and professional development plans and career goals. How do you envision that graduate school will prepare you for a career that allows you to contribute to scientific understanding and broadly benefit society? And then I have these 2 bullet points in broad, or intellectual merit and broader impacts. So that is the prompt for the personal statement. You have 3 pages to write it. Typically, this is the place to talk about your research experience, as well as your motivation. So you're writing about your current and previous research experience while also talking about your motivations, both what got you to do the field you're studying as an undergrad, as well as where you see that taking you. So what do you want to study in graduate school, and where does that lead after graduate school? The reason why we have intellectual merit and broader impacts in bold is because the National Science Foundation has something called the solicitation. Very important to look at the solicitation. If you start going to their website, which is, sorry, not there, right there, you will, there are going to be a lot of comments that link you to the solicitation. Really important to read thoroughly. One thing it talks about is how in both of your essays, you have to address the intellectual merit and broader impacts. And so in this case, you are addressing the intellectual merit as you. And so this is where you can talk about. Great. Well, we'll go into this in a detail in a moment. So I'm not going to devote too much space to it right now. And then the broader impacts you hope to have, right? Or have had as well. And then you have the graduate research plan statement. And this is essentially you presenting your proposed research for graduate school. No one requires you to do that research, but you have 2 pages to lay out like an ideal project for yourself. This is also a really great place to connect yourself to a graduate program that you're interested in. So in your personal statement, you might make reference to, like, UC Davis has this one professor who's doing this really cool thing. And then here in the graduate research plan statement, you can sort of draw a connection to how you would work with that person or the lab that they have access to, et cetera. And then you also have to touch on the intellectual merit and broader impacts of your proposed research project. Again, NSF GRFP requires you to sort of address both of these in both of the essays. So what are these? So intellectual merit, strong grades, awards, publications, communication skills, choice of institution, significant research experience. You're kind of already going to cover that last one. But yeah, so you're going to devote like a paragraph or 2 or 3 to covering this information. And then likewise, broader impacts. So again, this is the broader impacts you have had thus far as an undergraduate, the broader impacts you would like to have in your career, and then separately for the research essay, the broader impacts of your research itself. And so there you have a list of what that can include. General application tips. First one is the one I sort of already gave you, which is read the entire solicitation. That is a really valuable document on NSF GRFP website. And if you type in NSF GRFP in your URL, I'm pretty sure the website is .gov, but just type in NSF GRFP in the search bar, and it should be the first link that comes up. Oh yeah, keep the review process in mind. That's a really good one. This is an application that is reviewed by people in your field. And so they might not have the same specialty as you, or as you would like to have. But they, like, if you say that you're a chemical engineer, your application is going to be reviewed by chemical engineers. So keep that in mind. So know that you're writing to people who are closely but not entirely affiliated with your field. Remember that reviewers don't know you, and so and I think that's something that we as fellowship advisors will be really useful, and is helping you to recognize when you've made a mental leap because you can see all the connections, but perhaps your reader can't because you haven't given them enough information. And that can either be just knowing who you are and some background information, or some of your experiences. And then follow all directions on the material, as well as formatting. Yeah, it's really important. Like, it might seem minor, but we would never want you to be removed from the process, or for someone to have a bad taste about your application because it's not formatted correctly, which is not something that I would ever try to knock someone for, but I am not the only person who reviews applications. Yeah, that seems like a really good place to pause and answer some questions, because we're going to go through the next set of applications much quicker, maybe just like a PowerPoint slide per fellowship. So with that in mind, I'd be happy to take any questions, regarding NSF or anything else I said before NSF. And for whatever reason, there they are. So I got 3 chats right now. Oh, I'm sorry, Mariella, if you are still here, if you just look up, I don't know the name of it, but probably Office of National Fellowships, and then like FSU, you should probably be able to find us on YouTube. But either way, as long as if you signed up for this presentation, which you had to be here, you will get an email from me with a link to the rest of the presentation, well, to the entirety of the presentation. What type of professor would be preferred within the major, or can I ask someone from my gen ed classes? That's a really good question. So if you're applying for a research degree, if you're applying for a master's or doctoral degree that is research heavy or research intensive, then I would say at least one professor should have experience with you with research. At least one, perhaps all 3. 2 would be good, but at the bare minimum, you would want at least one professor who can speak to your research experience. And perhaps you're someone who did research as a freshman or sophomore in a field that you're no longer in, or even in your junior year that you're no longer in, but you think that professor, you had a good experience with them. You think even though that's not your field, they saw you doing research, they can speak to your abilities there, then that could still be a good professor. General education, I would say, I would say if it's not in your field, then probably just maybe one professor who's not in your field. If it's a field that is like not at all relevant to your graduate plans, if you're someone who's like, well, I'm for instance, let's take that history student I mentioned a little while ago. I'm a history major with a minor in statistics, and I bring that statistics into my history research, then a stats professor would actually be quite useful. So I would say preference, researchers who have experience with you doing research, at least 2 faculty from your department, even if one of them is only knows you from like classroom experiences. And then outside of that, like other professors would be good. The unfortunate tradition when it comes to applying for graduate school is that you apply for graduate school with recommendations from professors, like exclusively. There's some elasticity with that, but that's sort of the tradition. Let's see. If I take classes for master year, not doing research, I have not done research before, which one can I apply? Thanks. So if you're already a graduate student, NSF would still be good. Definitely, I believe that Hertz and we'll come up to these. I believe that Hertz and Ford would still be good if you fit their other criteria, as long as you're going for a PhD in your future. Let's see. Would it be okay to get a recommendation from a professor who advised me on research in a discipline different from that which I plan on pursuing? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I think we just talked about that. Sorry, I hadn't come to your question yet. There's some kind of crossover into, yeah. Cool. Okay. Well, I'm going to continue with the presentation, but again, please feel free to continue asking questions, and we'll come back to those at the end of it. So I want to introduce you to two other federally funded fellowships that for graduate school. So NSF GRFP is, if you weren't aware, National Science Foundation is funded by the federal government, and so is the Department of Energy's Computational Science Graduate Fellowship. And so this is where NSF was really good because it was broad. It was any of these fields. This one, as you can see, the fields are a lot more specific: physical, computer, mathematical, or life sciences, specifically using mathematical and computing techniques and research, in particular, high performance computing. This is for undergraduate seniors and those who have no more than a Bachelor's of Arts or Bachelor of Science degree and have not enrolled in graduate school. That is to say, alumni, like undergraduate alumni and first year graduate students. They have it's a much smaller pool of awards. This is not to discourage you from applying. I think that if a fellowship speaks to you, you feel like you're a good fit for it, then the number of available awards shouldn't matter too much. Funding up to 4 years. I don't know that we talked about funding with NSF, but we can go into that as well. We can come back to that if you're interested. So you have the funding information there. And I like that this one lays out tuition fees, some expenses, 12-week research practicum. So that is sort of the unique fellowship component in that it's bringing you and the other recipients of the DOE graduate fellowship together to sort of get to know each other, which is great because it means that you get to build a good network of people who are similarly interested in the same broad fields as you, as well as all in that you're all working in energy. Your interest is all in energy. And so those are people who you'll probably see for the rest of your career in some form, just because of a lot of crossover. And then we have the Department of Defense Science, Mathematics, Research, and Research for Transformation, or the SMART Scholarship. This is for students who will complete a undergraduate degree in STEM fields within 21 disciplines, which I will give you the link to this website. I'll just go and copy it as soon as it pops up. And they award a lot more. They award 300 every year. There's a stipend, so that is like cost of living allowance, essentially, full tuition and fees, summer internship. So again, getting you some experience as well, health insurance and book allowance. Sorry, this deadline needs to be updated, but expect that it's probably early December of 2020 as well. Okay, that website does not want to pop up, so I will. We're going to have to restart PowerPoint. Apologies. And let's try that again. Okay. Oh, and I guess I need to share my screen with you again, don't I? All right, so we're going to jump back into where we just were. And cool. Okay, so I forgot I was going to talk about one others, which is the National Defense Science and Engineering Graduate Fellowship. Again, it's science and engineering, so it says all STEM fields. U.S. citizens and nationals who intend specifically to earn a PhD or a doctoral degree rather than something like NSF would allow you to do a master's degree. So 3 years fellowship package, including a cost of living stipend, cost of your education, so tuition fees, and insurance allowance. Again, my apologies, I forgot to update that to December 2020. The good news, if you're looking at these and you're like, well, geez, I would like to apply for, 2 or 3 of them. A lot of the material that you would use could be reused, and so it would just be, cutting and pasting your essays into different parts to reuse them. Last year, I got to work with a lovely human being who started working on her NSF GRFP application like first week of May. We were talking about it, and basically got it to a place that she was really happy with it by the end of August. And then from August until the end of fall semester, it was really about tweaking what she had created, the foundation she had created with NSF GRFP, so that she could reuse portions of it for different other applications she was doing, so both graduate school and other fellowships she was applying for. She did not get NSF GRFP, just as a heads up, but the comment from NSF GRFP was basically, maybe we would have given to you, but one of your recommendations didn't come through, so that is not on her. And then, but she did end up getting Hertz and something called iGEM, which isn't in this presentation, but I'd be happy to talk to you about. Also for people interested in engineering. Then there's, so we just talked about several specifically federally funded programs, and now I'm going into the foundations. So Ford Foundation, these are private foundations. They usually have some sort of mission that you have to make sure that you fit. So Ford is looking for undergraduate seniors and graduate students in their first or second year, U.S. citizens, nationals, or permanent residents. They are specifically looking for research-based study in these following programs. And they tell you how many awards they give there, as well as the stipend is pretty detailed. Man, I just completely missed everything except for maybe the first deadline specific page. So apologies for that. Just again, transpose this a year ahead to 2020. Yep. And then there's Hertz. Hertz is another great program. So undergraduate seniors or first year graduate students, U.S. citizens or nationals at a tenable school must be pursuing a PhD or interested in pursuing a PhD in graduate school. There's fairly limited number of awards here, just 20. Again, you have your personal stipend, which is like what you live off of. Then you have your waiver of your essentially covering your tuition fees. It doesn't say fees here, so my guess is you'd still have to cover your fees, as well as some funding for fellows with dependents, which is really nice. Again, this one's going to be due October of 2020. So this one falls around the same time as NSF GRFP. Can be accepted in addition to other awards, which is lovely. Cool. So wanted to sort of help you along by giving you a timeline for preparing for both applying for fellowships like these, but also applying for graduate school. So if you went through this presentation and nothing spoke to you, you didn't like listening to me, then maybe this will be at least useful for when you're applying to graduate school. And I'm sorry it looks a little bit wonky. So task to complete. Basically, a lot of things happen first, 2 months. What I'm saying is 2 months prior to the deadline. Start looking at the materials. Think about who you want to do research with. Contact research services. Submit initial draft of documents to OGFA or ONF if you're a grad student, OGFA if you're ONF, that'd be my office. So we would like basically 2 months in advance of the deadline to start looking at your materials and giving you feedback on your application. And then a month and a half, continue working on your drafts, share it with the writing center for essentially a third set of eyes. You should also be sharing this again with your major professor, which we list as something you should at least do by the a month in advance of the deadline. Continue to submit revised drafts. Mhm. I think this portion, we used to do this presentation with OGFA, and so I think this portion is a little bit specific to them, particularly the SRS information and this proposal transmittal form signed by major professor, dean, and chair. I think that is specific to stuff that you do deal with OGFA, so that doesn't affect us. And then it says, 10 days prior to the award, submit final draft to fellowship award sponsor. So within 10 days, I tend to work with students up until like a day or two before the deadline for them to like feel like they've put as much time as they can into these applications. And but yeah, this is sort of an ideal timeline. I would say start 2 months in advance is really a great time to start. If you can have drafts of your essays, like first drafts or outlines, 8 weeks before the deadline, then that means you get 8 attempts to draft essays, because at least for my office and for me in particular, my goal is to work with students as often as once a week. So if you and I could sit down and get, me give you 8 sets of feedback while you're also getting feedback from your faculty, while you're also getting feedback from the writing center, then you're going to have a really solid essay when the deadline comes. Cool. Okay. So contacts. Don't call us. We're not in the office. We're at home. So don't call us. Don't use that number. But that is our website. Those are our social media handles. And our social media is very active. We post a lot about upcoming fellowship deadlines on there. We'll post some student stories. Right now, there's a few STEM stories up from alumni. There's some folks who are interested in like Department of State Foreign Services. So those, future diplomats. So that stuff's on there. So there's some really cool stories to read. We're always posting about upcoming fellowships, and also it's a good way to keep an eye on our events because we do a few presentations. This year we're front loading a lot of our presentations. So basically, we're doing 1 to 3 presentations a week between now and like the end of September. So definitely pay attention to that. You'll definitely get a lot of emails about them. Cool. Contact information. I'm Josh again. I'm the one in the second one from the top, and you can also leave admin off on my email. But I'd say is if you are interested in any of the things we talked about today, then do not hesitate to reach out to me. But if you're like, I really like what he was talking about, but I don't care for him at all, then reach out to someone else. That's also fine. I'm cool with that. I'd just rather you get some money, right? So yeah, that's my presentation. Yep, nothing else after that. So I'd be happy to take questions. Let's see if I can pull those up. Cool, I got some chats here. So the first question is, what does the number of awards mean? So when you saw number of awards, that's how many they intend that foundation or federal agency intends to give out in the next cycle. Yeah, and so inevitably, as someone else pointed out, that probably means how many people will receive an award. Yes, that's the goal. So can we assume the sponsors would use Turnitin to check essays? I don't know, because I'm frankly I'm not familiar with Turnitin. Generally, for me, students just send me their essays directly, either in a Word doc, PDF, Google Doc, or Microsoft Cloud. So, yeah, it's a great question, Alvin. So if Turnitin is essentially a form of checking for plagiarism, you can't plagiarize yourself. So if you cut and paste something you wrote in one essay into another essay that is also for a proposal for graduate school, then there's nothing wrong with doing that. And Alvin, if you could just make a comment that I understood your question correctly and I've answered it, I'd appreciate that, just to make sure. Okay, good, thank you. Yeah, yeah. So please don't feel as though you're not allowed to do this. This is not the same as like, you know, writing something for your, uh, you know, year 2 social science course, and then like circling back and using part of that essay in like your year 3 social sciences courses. This is you writing a strong foundation for fellowships, grants, um, and graduate school applications that you can, you know, cut and paste and modify to cater to each of the applications prompts. I imagine that many of you probably did the same when you were applying for undergrad. When um, you know, you probably had a personal statement that was like your foundation, and maybe you could submit it verbatim to different schools. In some cases, you might have had to modify it a little bit to fit the word count, or, you know, adjust the prompt more directly. But that is not an issue here. Mostly saw fellowships for STEM. Where can we find fellowships for social science? So yeah, this was a predominantly STEM focused presentation, but I invited social science students as well because we did talk about NSF GRFP, which again, if as long as you're social science with an interest in social science research, that'd be a really good fit for you for graduate school. If you're not, there are other fellowships that could be a really good fit. And to answer your question about where could you find them, um, I'm going to share my screen again, and I'm going to share this. So this is the Office of National Fellowships uh, Student Fellowship search page. So if this is the website's onf.fsu.edu, onf.fsu.edu. And then you just click on student fellowships. And so you could come here and you can put something in like, let's say graduate school year, senior grad student, area study, social science. And here you have fellowships that specifically uh, cater to those areas. So yeah, so and you'll even find, for those of you who are STEM, you can find that there's probably a lot more in here than what I talked about today. I just wanted to sort of give you a broad overview. So also please feel free to play around with this website. Yeah, good question. I did want to bring that up. And on the subject of wanting to bring things up, I also meant to share with you all if there are any freshmen, sophomores, juniors in here, um, then there's another presentation you may find really helpful as well. Next week, my colleague Jesse on Wednesday, same time, 3:30, next Wednesday is doing a presentation on undergraduate STEM fellowships that are not to cover graduate school so much as to cover like research experiences, help fund the remainder of your undergraduate degree. Yeah, that's really most of their focus. So that is next week, next Wednesday at 3:30, and the Zoom link, if anyone is interested in registering for that, is right there. So it's really ideal for freshmen, sophomores, juniors to attend. Anyone who's not graduating this coming year. Let's see, where do I pick up? Do you only offer assistance for applying for research-based programs? My plans to get a master's in biomedical science. No, we don't limit ourselves to providing assistance for people who are doing research. Our limit is for people who are applying for fellowships, scholarships, grants. That's what we focus on, particularly fellowships that fund experiences where you bring people of similar interests or passions together. So a lot of these fellowships, as you probably picked up on, had a component of bringing the recipients together to engage with one another. I talked a lot about like a network, or I talked briefly about like having a network and the value of all of that. So as long as you can find like we don't spend our days reviewing your personal statements for graduate school, but if you're looking at funding for those programs, then that's where we can be useful, is helping you to prepare your proposal for the funding. Uh, is having research experience required for getting into graduate school and receiving funding? I would say, yeah, in some cases you'll find that when you're looking at the graduate school applications that they may explicitly state, like, we're looking for people who have this research experience. Um, and some of the funding might say the same thing. There are, but it's not exclusive. I would say it really depends on what you're choosing to apply for. With these fellowships, I don't know that it's explicit for all of them, but I'd say that the level of competition for these fellowships would require that all of the people who are applying have some experience with graduate with research projects in order to be competitive. Which I think was a very circular sentence, like, because it's so competitive, having research makes you competitive. I think it's what I was trying to say. Um, if you're wondering how you might go about getting some research experience, uh, man, what a world we live in right now. That is a harder question to answer than it would have been last year. I would say, start talking, because I know our labs are open to a degree, and I know that our professors and our graduate students are still having to find ways. You can't graduate with a PhD without doing your dissertation, right? And so, like, our graduate students are still having to find ways to complete their research project, which may mean that all of these people are still in need of assistance. um, and that's where undergrads can really be extremely useful, and where you can get a great deal of use out of your grad students as well as your faculty is, they might need help doing their research, and you could use some research experience. So that'd be a great place to start. Another thing, think about something called honors in the major. You don't have to be an honors student to pursue honors in the major. Any junior or senior in undergrad at FSU is potentially eligible to do honors in the major, which is essentially you creating and pursuing your own research project over the course of 2 to 3 semesters, while being mentored by one of your professors. You have to defend your research after, once you complete it, which means that you have a small thesis committee of the mentoring professor plus 2 other professors that you choose, who will review your thesis, ask you questions about it, you defend it, and then you can say, like, I've done my own research project um, before graduate school, and that will definitely make you stand out. Um, another really great way to think of, to get some research experience if you don't have any is something called directed individual study. Directed individual study is where you and a professor, so you have to basically go to a professor that you like and say, hey, really like X topic, can't seem to find a class about it. You brought it up in maybe one of your classes, and I really liked how you spoke about it. I'd like to dive into that deeper. And would you mind setting up directed individual study with me? So essentially, it's you and a professor create a class together. Typically, it's you doing, like, lit review or some sort of research project over the course of the semester. So you're getting college credit for a class that you've sort of created with a professor that can be tailored to your interest in getting some research experience. Let's see. Thank you for that compliment, Sean. Does your office help solely with securing funding and scholarships for grad programs, or do you provide general advice and assistance with applying to grad school? So, if our office were staffed with more people, then I'd probably be all about helping people actually write their personal statements for graduate school. But because we are three full-time employees and 2 part-time employees, we really focus on the finding resources for fellowship funding, as well as the pursuit of those fellowships, meaning like we help students to kind of through what's called the appreciative advising model, get to know people, help them to think about what it is they care about, and how they would go about pursuing the things that they care about. And based on that conversation, sort of point them in the direction of different fellowships and scholarships that might fit their interests, that would allow them to pursue the things they care about, and then helping them with the applications that they choose to apply for. So if you're asking if for just general advice, yeah, I mean, we'd be good for that. If you're asking for us to sit down with you weekly to like help you with your essays for graduate school, it's probably not something we would do. But I'm always happy to give people advice whether they ask for it or not. I think one piece of that advice might be, you should also, for questions like that, you should really be talking to your professors in the field you care about. But I'm always happy to be another wall for you to bounce ideas off of, as well as to give you my own thoughts on it. Let's see. Why is the office called Office of National Fellowships? Is this a national organization or a school-owned department? Yeah, so great question. So we are the Office of National Fellowships because we help FSU students apply for nationally competitive scholarships and fellowships. We are an FSU program. We fall under the undergraduate studies. So the department that was your main source of advising before you got into your major. That's the department that my boss is the dean of undergraduate studies. Someone's not seen the Zoom link. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I posted the Zoom link in the waiting room. My apologies. Sorry. So earlier, like 10 minutes ago, maybe 5 minutes ago, I mentioned something about another presentation for freshmen, sophomore, juniors interested in STEM. And this is an opportunity for you to find research opportunities or funding for the remainder of your undergraduate degree. And I posted a Zoom link in the wrong place, but I'm posting it here now. So thank you for pointing that out. So that's the Zoom link. Again, that presentation is Wednesday of next week at 3:30. And so, yeah, that would be a fantastic program sit-in. And my colleague Jesse is wonderful and will give a great presentation. Let's see. If I just want to study a Master's of Science or a Master's of Engineering, would I be disadvantaged comparing people who are pursuing a PhD? It depends on the fellowship. That's a really good question. And a lot of these fellowships tend to focus on PhDs, right? Like you're not going to be eligible for this if you're applying for Hertz. But if you're applying for NSF GRFP, yeah, you're just as viable a candidate. Yeah, so any final questions before we go? Oh, thank you for your time, Alvin. Yeah, well then, it was a pleasure talking to you all. Thank you all for coming. As I said, I will be I'll be sending you an email with a link to the YouTube recording of this if you want to refer back to it, and you can share it with people who you think might find it valuable. Cool. All right. Thank you all so much. Have a good rest of your day. Bye.